Program mode, what is it? Is it okay for me to use it? Hi and welcome to episode 106 of the Photography Explained podcast. I nearly failed on the first line there. I'm your host Rick, and in each episode I will try to explain one photographic thing to you in plain English in less than 10 minutes-ish without the irrelevant details. What I tell you is based on my lifetime of photographic experience and not Google. Yep, still having to read it out. Before I go on, I need your help. I need your questions to answer. This is what my podcast is all about, answering your photography questions. So please get in touch with your question, and not only will I answer your question, but I will give you a shout out on that episode, which is nice. Just head over to photographyexplainedpodcast.com/start. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you. Here is the answery bit. Program mode is indicated by the letter P on a Canon camera. In program mode, the camera selects the aperture and the shutter... I'll start that again. Program mode is indicated by the letter P on a Canon camera. In program mode, the camera selects the aperture and the shutter speed when you press the shutter release halfway. Program mode is more advanced than full auto, as it allows the user to select some settings rather than the camera doing all of this, and the aperture and shutter combination can be quickly adjusted by the photographer. Okay, so why am I talking about program mode then? Well, it's something that came up in a previous episode. I'll come on to that in the talky bit. First off though, what is program mode? Well, program mode is one of the creative zones in the Canon ecosystem. I'll talk about this in the next episode, and then I really have to move on. I won't talk about this. Oh yes, I will talk about it in the next episode, sorry. And then I really have to move on to something else. Okay, I've been spelling program incorrectly all my life, and now it is finally time to get it correct. There is no ME at the end of program in this context. It's okay, I finally get it. And while I'm on the subject of the actual word, what does it actually mean? Yes, this is completely irrelevant detail, so while I must apologise for boring you with this, I found it interesting. I found this definition courtesy of the Google. It's this. Provide a computer or other machine with coded instructions for the automatic performance of a task. There you go. That makes perfect sense. And yes, I found that interesting, and thankfully it didn't waste too much of your time, did it? So, P is for professional. No, P is not for professional. P is for program. Now, I've actually heard people say this in the past, in person as well as on podcasts. I mean, where else do you listen to things about photography, let's be honest with you. How does program work? Well, you press the shutter release button halfway. The camera should confirm the focus and tell you the aperture and shutter speed that it thinks will give you a correct exposure. If either of them blink, there's something up. So why not use program and not full auto? In program, only the aperture and the shutter are set automatically. You can set other stuff yourself. Now, in full auto, a lot of these things are set by the camera and not you, and you can't do anything about it. So that's one big difference, and then there's another one. It's called program shift. Now, you can change the aperture and shutter combination by rotating the top dial on a Canon camera, well, on a Canon 16. This is a quick and easy way of selecting the aperture and or shutter of your preference and still getting the correct exposure. It's dead handy, I have to say. And that's all I've got to say on how it works. It's nice and simple for once. I might get this episode inside 10 minutes. Let's give it a go. So what do? Well, I use this mode when I just want to take photos without any faff. When I'm acting not like a photographer, but somebody with a camera, without a care in the world. Okay, so the talky bit. Well, I was going to tell you what I've just told you, but I've just done that. I use program mode when I want to give myself a complete break from anything technical and simply take photos without any great thought, just for the joy of taking carefree photos. And what's wrong with that? I mean, I know AV mode, which I use day in, day out. It's not difficult to use, but that's not the point. I use AV mode all the time, and program mode gives me a break from technical stuff and lets me take photos, like I say, without a care in the world. Now, am I talking absolute nonsense here? Well, I might be, but there's a couple of points I want to make here. I enjoy using program mode. I find it liberating, and knowing I'm using it makes me less demanding of my photos. I think less about anything other than what I'm taking a photo of. And I've got some interesting stuff as a result of this feeling of freedom. No pressure to get a brilliant, technically perfect photo, just me enjoying myself. So I know I talk a lot about needing a professional mindset to be a successful photographer, but I need a break from this sometimes, and this is what I do. This is how I get my break. This is how I keep myself happy. So what about you? Is it okay for you to use program mode? Now, there are those who say, no, to be a proper photographer, you need to take photos in manual mode. I've had people say this to me. I've been called out for this on on the internet and social media. You don't, by the way, have to use manual mode to take photos. And all those small-minded experts who say this, speaking from their lofty perches on Planet Guru, have missed a couple of things. Firstly, what if the photographer does not know how to use manual mode? Just because they do and I do, it doesn't mean that you should. Is the photographer better serving the world of photography by not taking photos at all because they can't use manual mode? Of course not. If program is your preferred mode, fine. I'd rather you took photos using program than didn't go out taking photos because you found manual too difficult, or felt pressure to use manual but were not able to. If you feel that to be a proper photographer you have to use manual mode but you don't understand it, that's wrong, isn't it? It's just fundamentally wrong. And also, God, I'm going on a bit of a rant here, aren't I? What if the photographer wants to use program? Like I say, I do sometimes. I know how to use manual mode. I can use manual mode, well, not with my eyes closed, which is what I've written in the script, because you can't see what the exposure is. I guess you'd need program for that, wouldn't you? There you go, another reason. But I know manual mode inside out. But sometimes I just want to use program. And I'm not going to apologise for that. It's what I want to do. And finally, since when was anyone given the right to tell others what to do? Now, on my website, this is a digression here, not in the script. I've assembled a number of, I've called it photography snobbery. And if you go to my website, rickmcavoyphotography.com, there's a page there, photography snobbery. Just hit in the search bar, photography snobbery, and you find it. And this manual mode thing, it's one of the ones that, and it's one of the more frequent, irrational, incorrect, unpleasant statements I've heard mentioned about photography and photographers. You have to use manual mode to be a real photographer. And no, you don't. But I will say this, I recommend learning and understanding manual mode, because if you can understand manual mode, you've got the exposure triangle sorted. So it is a good thing to understand. You don't have to use it. I very rarely use manual mode because I use AV mode a lot. Most of the time, actually. And program mode, yeah, as I said, it's for personal, leisurely photography. So if program mode works for you, absolutely fine. Don't let this be a barrier to going out taking photos. Don't let this be a barrier to enjoying photography. And if anybody tells you you shouldn't be using program, you're not a proper photographer, send them to me and I'll sort them out, okay? Let's look after each other, yeah, because it's a nice world, the photography world. There's a few horrible people out there who I don't like. So my big takeaway, use program mode if you want to, but I strongly recommend learning and understanding manual mode. And if you want to do this, great, but if you don't, not a problem. As long as you're going out taking photos, creating new stuff and enjoying photography, I do not give a stuff what camera mode you use. And another thing, no one will ever know what mode you took a photo in. No one will ever know. Let's just think about that. No one knows what mode you took a photo in. Well, how can they? The photo is the photo. And if you think about this even more logically, if you take a photo in program mode using the settings that the camera has decided on, if you went to manual mode, you might end up taking the same photo in the same conditions, in the same light, with the same subject matter, with exactly the same settings. What's the difference between the camera deciding what you do and what the settings are for a photo? I'll try that again as well. What's the difference between the camera telling you what the settings are that it's going to use and then using them, to the camera telling you what the settings are that you need to use and you setting them? It's not that big a difference, is it? There's this myth that program mode is bad and manual mode is the be-all and end-all. It's not. It's not. It's more important to take photos. Right, I'm gonna stop there. What do I need to do next? Related episodes. Well, I'm not going to repeat them all again. Episodes 100, 101, 2, 3, 4, 5, all about camera settings. So what's next? Let's move on. Oh no, more on mode. Sorry. Photography Explained podcast episode 107. What are creative modes in photography? And what are the other modes? Shout out to me and my splendid course, How to Become a Real Estate Photographer. Said it first time this time. Find out more at rickmcavoyphotography.com/courses. And why not, eh? Why can't I promote myself? Okay, I'm done. Thanks for listening to my small but perfectly formed podcast. To find out more about my podcast and do stuff to help me, please check out photographyexplainedpodcast.com/start. Brought to you by, well, this episode was brought to you by a considerable amount of water. Very refreshing. Thank you, tap. I've been Rick McAvoy. Thanks again very much for listening to me and for giving me 10-ish minutes of your valuable time, and I will see you on the next episode. Cheers from me, Rick.